Batman! I had to.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, I did. Welcome to Call to the Table, the podcast where we're a bunch of nerds who talk about random stuff and enjoy it. Most of it's
random stuff about Jesus, though.
We're talking about Jesus.
Oh, no. You had to get...
theme song.
All right.
No, we talk about, like, really good topics that are wholesome and good for the family, but also, you know, the truth.
Deep.
Deep, deep, deep rivers.
There you go.
And wide. How deep? How wide? I don't know. I'm Olivia, and I'm Batman. Ha, ha, ha. I'm Batman.
I'm John, and I might as well just say I'm the Joker.
Yeah, you are.
You are.
That's good. Yeah. My nemesis.
That's why we mess with each other all the time.
It's great. It's perfect.
I don't know what superhero I am.
You gotta pick one because...
I'm Jordan. I'm Spider-Man.
Oh, man.
I'm Caroline, and I'm Alfred. I keep all of these lunatics in check.
You don't keep me in check.
Thank you. I knew you would appreciate that.
I appreciate that
I
greatly.
do appreciate it.
No, but you're gonna have to pick a DC superhero because on our wedding website, the bridal party it's DC or the Justice League, and as of right now, and the groom's party is the Avengers.
Jordan,
I love
you're
it.
Robin.
No, I don't want to be Robin.
Catgirl?
I'm Catgirl.
I mean, Catwoman.
Catwoman, whatever.
It's Batgirl, Catwoman.
Okay.
It's also
Get it straight.
yeah,
They're
Batwoman.
both female.
There is Batwoman.
There is a
I'm
Batwoman.
Catwoman.
There's a Batgirl, Batwoman. There's a Batboy.
Batboy, the person that brings the bats?
No. And Batman.
I'm Batman.
There's Robin. And there's Nightwing. There's Teen Titan Robin.
And then
There's Teen Titan Go Robin, which is the bad one.
Bad.
Then there's Young Justice Robin.
There's exactly.
Both of them.
Y'all, do you watch the DC universe on CW?
We are being way off topic now.
You might need a
No. We continue. Today we're talking about...
Hey, that's my job. Shush. That is my job. Thank you very much.
Then
Number
do
three
your
is-
job.
I would have, except for the fact that somebody decided to go off on a whole DCC thing.
Are we surprised? I'm a nerd.
I mean,
we
that's
are
not-
too, but
He's
still.
number 3.
Number 3, okay. Alright, so today's topic was given to us by Ian David Mount on Instagram, and it is the topic of women preaching.
See, we take your suggestions and actually do them.
Yeah. So
Keep giving them to us. We'll do them.
The first thing that we need to talk about
Thank you,
is
Welcome.
setting the stage. What is the current view about women in preaching?
Depends on the church.
Personal view or the church's view?
You can say, I took it as overall. When I wrote it, I was thinking like the overall kind of general view. But if you want to say your own personal view, you can go for it.
Why don't we do, like, personal view... Oh, no.
Overall.
Church as a whole, and then personal view.
Okay.
So go live.
In my opinion, because I give my opinion,
Of course.
the church's view is, no.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd probably go against most female popular belief being I don't like to call myself a feminist, but I definitely do view myself as a minor feminist. I also agree. I think there are places in the church for women, and there are places in the government for women. Being a pastor is not one of them. Guest speaking, yes. Preaching, not my cup of tea.
I definitely believe that women can preach. I again wouldn't want them in a leadership preaching role.
Right.
Like again, you said time, place for them within it. That's a great way of putting it. I think.
Are we agreeing?
Yes, we are agreeing.
Shocker!
Like you said, we agree. Really, 99.9% of the
We really
time.
do, though.
You're just, like, pretending that
What do you think the church's view is?
The church's view is they can stay in the nursery. They can stay with the children's ministry.
That's where I can't stand it.
Yeah.
And that's not, in my opinion, the right way of doing it, because children and that nursery need both male and female. You're supposed to have mother and father for bringing up children, not just a mother. So,
I wrote that they have a kind of view of it's a feminist issue. Like, they kind of gloss over it and be like, it's not really a church issue, it's a feminist issue. So they don't really, like you said, Liv, the answer is typically no. But I feel like the reason it's no is because, well, that's a feminist thing, and we don't want to have to involve that in the church.
Right.
I don't think there's a whole lot of thought behind it.
Right.
That's what I took. My personal view, I'm going to say later because it goes with another point that we have.
Okay.
So I'm going to wait to give my personal view. Go, Caroline.
So I feel like I'm the odd one out here because I do believe in a perfect world that there could be women pastors and male pastors because we were both created in the image of God and we were both given leadership capabilities. But because this is an imperfect world and there is a lot of ego and pride and fundamentalist belief that doesn't always have root in Scripture, that it's not an issue worth fighting about. There are bigger issues that we should be focusing on rather than just this. Now, as far as expanding women's roles and allowing them to do more in the church, that's a good thing. But, is it necessary that we have women preachers? I say no, because there's a lot of other things in the church that is far more pressing than that. And as far as the church's viewpoint on it, I think I just gave it. It tends to be a resounding no. So
I think we all agree on that part.
Yeah. So what does the Bible say about it, though?
Okay, so do you want to do this one, John?
You start. You actually will have the notes that you can pull up.
Caroline
I pull
has
notes out of
notes
my
on
head.
We have our historians here to.
Caroline has notes on that.
Yeah. So I feel like what people quote the most is 1 Corinthians 14. Again, I've got the English Standard Version. And if you go straight to the verse that is talking about it, it is... Hold on. Okay. It is specifically verses 33 through 35. And if y'all don't mind, I'm going to read them.
Go for it.
For God is not a God of confusion, but of peace. As in all the churches of the saints, the women should keep silent in the churches, for they are not permitted to speak, but should be in submission. As the law also says, if there is anything they desire to learn, let them ask their husbands at home, for it is shameful for a woman to speak in church. Now, it's taking that out of context that I feel like has done women in the church the most wrong. Because we have to think about the churches at the time. We're talking about these early Greco-Roman churches where we have to examine what their culture was like. And we also have to look at, like you mentioned in the last podcast, Liv, context is key about these verses. And if we look at the whole chapter of 14 in 1 Corinthians, it's talking about there not being confusion in the church because that is keeping the message from going through. This is the same chapter that talks about if there is a prophecy, there needs to be someone who interprets it. Same thing for if someone speaks in tongues. Someone needs to interpret it. We've also got, let's see, what else? Yes, let everything be done for building up. Let everybody take turns to do this. Let 2 or 3 prophets speak, and let the others weigh what is said. That's verse 29. If a revelation is made to another sitting there, let the first be silent. So we're talking about people doing things in turn. And it sounds like they were having a problem with women just sitting in the back gossiping. I know I'm taking sort of a leap there, but I'm thinking about the way that Jewish synagogues were set up and that they had the women in the back in a specific, walled area that it was a partition. You could still see through it, but the women were in the back, and then you had all of the men in the inner synagogue. And so, think about it. If you're in the back, you're probably going to whisper and talk amongst yourselves because, you're bored. You're not part of everything. And so it sounds like because of the way these Greco-Roman women had been raised, they were used to being able to say more, do more, and all of these things. And they're trying to establish order and this new church system. And so that's why he did it. But as far as women having places to speak in church as well as just speak out, I mean, we have so many important female figures that are like, I'm thinking prophetesses, because we've got the prophetess Deborah in the book of Judges, who was a judge of Israel. And she went out to battle and made a prophecy about, shoot, I'm forgetting the dude's name, but it's the dude who got killed with a tent spike.
Right.
So there was her. And then we also have the prophetess who was in the temple when Jesus came in for his circumcision, who prophesied about him. And so women need to be able to say things, but they were talking about keeping order within the church service. And so I think we need to, because of the way everything is today, we need to reevaluate, what that means. It doesn't mean that women shouldn't speak at all during church services. Right. I feel like it's sort of that continuing revelation thing, whereas as the culture changes and people kind of maybe fall into a pattern and we are able to still keep order within the system and be respectful, then, everybody should have a turn to speak. But I feel like that verse has been taken incredibly out of context, because that's what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So, because, otherwise it just sounds like, girls, when you get into church, shut up.
Right.
Well, I think another verse that's taken out of context in reference to what women should be doing is where it says, wives, submit to your husbands. I think that's another thing where we are... Hold on, Liv.
No,
I know.
She's just hand raising. She feels it.
There's also a comment where it says, husbands, submit to your wives. And a lot of people don't reference that. They reference wives, submit to your husbands. I think that's another thing with women preaching is, well, no, even if you're not married, no, you're supposed to be submitting to the men. Look at it. It's in the Bible. It says submit to the men.
And the bit about husbands submitting to their wives is longer than the wives submitting to their husbands.
And I say, anytime a woman's supposed to do something in the Bible for her husband, there's about 2 to 3 things a husband's supposed to do for his wife.
Yes.
I love it.
Well, and
Go ahead, Liv.
that goes on to say, and I can't remember where I heard it or if it's specifically in the Bible, but it states that the man is the spiritual head of the family.
Yes, yes.
But then it goes on to say that the woman is the neck. What controls the head? Your neck.
Well, that's why there's the whole saying of behind every good man is a strong woman. Well, and what I like to think about is what my Bible teacher, because I went to a private school, and one thing that he used to say is it was like an umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said you have the umbrella, which is the man. He covers everything.
Yeah.
But the handle that keeps up the umbrella is the wife, who is sitting there and is making sure that the man is accountable, going back to accountability, but that what is underneath the umbrella is taken care of, which is the children and everything underneath. And I think that's how the church should be as far as women being involved in the church.
Absolutely.
Yes, you have a man who's covering everything, but then let the woman take care of what is underneath that everything.
Yes.
Yes, Caroline.
So I like all of the metaphors that we're using. This is something that I have heard that specifically talks about the family unit. Because if man and woman were made in the image of God, some people have said, well, we have the father, the mother, and the child. It's a trinity. Mm-hmm. And that we were created to represent who God is to the universe. And that by splitting, having these split genders, it was supposed to show the multiplicity of God and who he is. And some people have said, well, that means that the Father is God the Father, who is the head, but he is not the I just wanted to put this out. Everybody agrees that in the Trinity, each person of the Godhead is just as powerful as the other one, right?
Yes.
Okay. That's the way it's supposed to be in the family too, but we still have God the Father who is the head.
Right.
Does that mean that he is more powerful than God the Son or God the Holy Spirit? He is just the head. They have decided that is the way it works. And so then some people have said that the mother is supposed to represent Jesus, the Son of God, who is the more, I don't want to say he's the more nurturing one, but you know what I mean. It's the roles that they play. God the Father stays in heaven, and he is like the stable ruler of everything.
The
And
mastermind.
then we have, well, when I say stable ruler, it's like we have the one person who stays in this one place. We have the person who goes out to everybody as sort of the emissary, and then the Holy Spirit, who is still kind of a mystery, but he's also everywhere at once, sort of thing. So I know it's kind of weird to equate the kid with the Holy Spirit, but it's still a trinity, and it's supposed to show how we have an authority, but then we also have that equality, because woman was not made from the head that she might rule over man, nor was she made from the foot that she might be underneath the foot, but she was made from the rib, which is on top of his heart, that they might be equal.
Yes, John.
Okay, I was making sure Olivia doesn't have something directly with what Caroline said. Mine's going more off Jordan.
No, your hand was up. You're good.
With me and Jordan within our marriage, we initially said we wanted to be equal partners. And we have been coming more and more to the realization that equal partners does not mean equally splitting up responsibility.
Yep.
And that makes sense.
We are equally important within it. We have an equal voice with one another, but we don't have equal shares of, well, we're going to go through the list and have a number next to everything for importance, and we're going to have the exact same number of chores with each other within the number system. No, because that doesn't work. Because if you put a number on, let's just say a random thing, household chores, any of them, any of the household chores. Well, vacuuming. If you put a number on vacuuming, well, let's just say it never gets done. Well, that really gets bad. But say that the number for laundry is higher. Well, doing laundry, of course, if you don't do that, it gets really bad too. But both lead to really bad ends. But if one has a higher number because it needs to be done more frequently, then you're not really, it's almost like devaluing you as a person for doing that.
Yeah.
I feel like I know where you're going with that, but can you sort of...
Basically, John's saying, going with the household chores thing, right? He's saying that if he's constantly getting laundry done, and it has the same thing as making the beds, right?
Oh, hold on. No, I get
it's
it now.
devaluing you as a person because you're getting one thing done, but like 5 other things aren't getting done. If you sit there as a woman or as a guy, and I'm going to say this just in general, for anybody who's the head of a church, if you're sitting there and you're focusing on money and your congregation is suffering, then it doesn't matter if it's a woman or a man preaching up at the pulpit. You need to make sure, and this goes into what we talked about with accountability in the church, it's checks and balances. You need to make sure that everything is getting the same attention. And for me and John, and this kind of goes into marriage, for me and John, what we're realizing is just because I'm taking care of the house does not mean that John going and working for 60 hours a week is more important than me taking care of the house. And so that's where it comes into where we have had to figure out that, yes, we're equal partners, but that does not mean that I need to be working 60 hours as well as him.
Yeah.
Like, we're not having to keep that equal. As well as he has 5 chores and I have 5 chores. He's taking care of the dog and I'm taking care of the dog because right now the dog is our kid. So it's not a equal partnership in the sense of every single thing that we are responsible for is the exact same. What it is understanding, and this goes into the woman's role in the church, it's understanding that just because there is a man who's the head does not mean that the woman then has an unimportant job or a less important job. It is just as equally as important as what the preacher is doing, just the preacher needs to be the one who's leading the flock overall.
And I like how you've pointed out that both jobs are important.
Yes.
There are no true small jobs. They are all important because they all work together to make the wheel go round.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I agree with everything y'all are saying. Just so you know. Kind of elaborating on that, if we want to go a step further as far as the church, I find that when a woman stands up at the pulpit and does actually speak on a topic, they're going to relate more to the female part of the congregation and come from a more tender direction. And I think that's why we see a lot of females being the children's pastors, is because they have a tender way of communicating Christ, as you were saying, to the children. Because I think most churches that I've participated in, the children's pastor
Is a woman.
is a woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know? But then, if you go further, I really appreciated the way, one of the things that with the church we attended, before I moved to Houston, was we had equal amount of male Bible study leaders or youth leaders as female youth leaders. And we separated the girls from the boys. So the youth leader, after, Wednesday night church, we had worship, which was led by a man and a woman who were married. They led it together. The youth pastor, the teen pastor, he spoke, and sometimes there was a woman that would come and speak, and sometimes it was actually the female worship leader. And then we would break off into small groups, and then whatever the youth pastor was speaking on, we gave the gender-specific conversation about. I know this because I was one of the leaders, and I worked with the 8th grade girls, and it was really beneficial. It was this full-on equal partnership amongst male and female, which can happen, but does that mean I want to see a woman at the pulpit saying, I'm your pastor? Not necessarily.
So what for you is this is on our notes, I'm just asking you a question.
No,
What for you, and I'm not disagreeing with you, I want to make sure you know. I just am asking. What for you is a difference between a woman getting up on the pulpit once in a while and preaching something that does need to be more of a nurturing standpoint than an actual woman pastor? What crosses the line for you? What is the issue? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think for me personally, it just goes down to, yes, I'm a very non-traditional Christian. Again, I use this term lightly, charismatic Christian, where I am open to the ideas of going out, spreading the gospel. I am, dancing on the streets. I am doing these things that make sense to me, that people, I am tattooed. I am different in that sense. But there are some traditions and there are some biblical standings that I sit back and I'm like, I don't disagree with that. This is going to sound really bad because I do like to sit here and say, I'm somewhat of a feminist. I am, let's go women's rights, let's go, let's push these things, but she should be supporting the man, it should be a supportive role. It's like in dance. Let me just give this, let's see if this metaphor works. In dance, the lead dancer, the first one that you see, the principal dancer, is a female. The male is the support system for that principal dancer. He may also be a principal dancer, but most of the time he does less variations, more lifting, more support towards the one that we're really looking at. Really looking at that particular part of the beauty of it. It's that female getting her leg really high doing 600 turns. It wouldn't be possible if he wasn't standing there holding on to her, lifting her up, supporting her.
Excellent example is the rose pas de deux in Sleeping Beauty.
Absolutely. In the church, I feel like roles have to be reversed in that. I also agree in government. Roles need to be reversed in that. I personally, it would take a lot of convincing for me to vote for a female president. Not just because of the stereotypical, well, she's hormonal. One period day, blow everything up, hit the red button. But
men are just as emotional.
Exactly, but we think more. Females think more emotionally and go at things in more of an emotional standpoint, and I want to take care of you as a being, whereas men think more logistically. They think more, I'm going to tell you this, 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 and this. I don't care if it hurts your feelings. This is how it's going to be. Not all men and not all women are that way. However, that's how God made us. We're more of the nurturer, while they're more of the provider. The male pastor is going to provide that food at the pulpit where the female pastor could potentially just sit there and be more of a nurturer. And that's where I get into this whole, we need to speak the truth of the Bible, saying, you're not a Christian, there's one destination.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I feel, again, these are all my opinions, don't come at me in the comment section, and if you do, I'm in charge of the comment section.
Just delete it.
But I would see more of a female pastor standing up there and being like, there's a way that you can avoid this place that we're not really going to talk about with love and compassion and not that direct, like, it's hell. It's heaven or hell. It's choose him or don't choose him.
Mm-hmm.
And for someone like me who does have more of a logistical thought process as far as that, I tend to be more of that direction. Does that mean I need to be a pastor? No.
Hey everyone! So normally this is the time when I would tell you about our sponsors, or lack thereof, and how to reach out to us if you want to sponsor us. However, the group has decided that we are going to wait on getting sponsors. So, instead, starting in March, we're going to be using this space to talk about some wonderful charities, ministries, and outreach opportunities that the table team will be sponsoring for that month. We can't wait. In the meantime, please continue listening to us on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcast, and Apple Podcast, finally, as well as YouTube. We are still on YouTube. That's all for me. Thanks again for listening. Bye, guys.
So
Okay.
now I have another one. So
Whoa, it's weird being on the receiving end of this.
I know
I'm
you're
usually the one with
getting
questions.
you're getting attacked this time instead of
Oh,
Caroline.
fine, let's go.
So like there's and I can give this to you because you're about to get married. There's a female pastor that John and I have watched who did a whole series on marriage, and she is very blunt.
Yeah.
Much like how you are, much
Yeah.
like what you're talking about. Look, if you go and cheat, you're gonna screw up your marriage.
Yeah.
Guess what? It happens. So would you avoid a church if there was a woman pastor that did have that approach, like you're saying? Would
Okay.
you avoid that church specifically because there's a woman pastor?
No.
Like, would you choose everything else before you went to that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. My answer for you would be I don't know, because I don't jump into a church just because of the body of people alone. I go at it with, does God want me in this location? And if God was like, I want you to go to attend this church and it's a female pastor, I'm going to be obedient. I might be digging my heels into the ground at first, but I know that God has a greater purpose, and he might be needing myself and my future husband, if that's the path that God asked us to go to, if that's the church God asked the two of us to do, God might be saying, this individual has something that I need to plant a seed in your marriage and your future with for this season. Because like we have talked about in the past, I don't, not necessarily on the podcast, God doesn't stick us in one church for our entire lives. We end up outgrowing our churches, and we end up like, that's all that we can get fed, and God's like, all right, I'm going to shift your heart a little bit. Time to move on. I truly believe that. I don't think we should be, under the same pastoral leadership for every single year of our life. That's just what I think. So if God called me and said, hey, if God said, hey, this is the church that you're going to go to. Yes, it has a female pastor. I might be hesitant at first. I might dig my heels in. But if God was like, this is the church that, you and your husband are going to go to, I wouldn't have a hard heart. I would be open and receptive to God's got something that he needs to teach me, and only she can give it to me right now.
Okay.
Or somebody within that congregation.
Exactly. It might not even be the pastor. I might meet somebody that...
Like us.
Yeah. That, I need to connect with for the rest of my life. Or I might meet somebody that I have to pour into. I don't want to remove that opportunity either, because God has called me into very weird situations, not for my own personal gain, but to share my story with somebody else.
Yes, John.
And, sorry, I'm just kind of relating this to a story within the Bible. I can't remember who it was, but the dream of the unclean animals.
It was Peter.
Thank you. About,
Peter on the roof.
God, in a dream, brought unclean animals to him and said, eat.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, these are unclean, Lord. Next night, same dream. And
No, not next night.
It was the same.
It was the same
Now even
day.
more in my space. Like,
John and
I
his
have
long
like
legs.
twisted
Guys, if
my
you hear
body.
any bumps, it's because he's just
I'm
so
trying
long.
not to hit that.
He's just so long.
I have a very tall husband.
You're
a
tall
recap
too.
of last
I'm not as tall
week's
as him.
podcast. John entered into my space. We were going to get duct tape. We didn't get duct tape, and now he's even
I'm
more.
invading her space.
It's even more than before.
But
So-
anyways, as continuing what we're talking about.
The sheet with all of the unclean animals in his dream was lowered 3 times, and he was told, kill and eat. And Peter said, Lord, I can't. I've never eaten an unclean animal in my life. And God said, what I have made clean, I'm not going to say you shouldn't question, because that wasn't the exact wording. But what I have made clean, you should not call unclean. And then immediately after he woke up from that, a messenger came from Cornelius, the Roman guard, saying, will you please come to my house? And the meaning of the dream was made clear because he was going to a Gentile.
Mhm.
And he was, of course, very, very Jewish. And he felt that separation between himself and other Gentiles. So he was having to go against his raising. And he even says when he's there, now I understand what the dream was. And so he baptized Cornelius and his family that day. And they even had a witness of the Holy Spirit fall upon them.
Right.
And so, I'm sorry, John.
Yeah,
I took your story
it's
from you.
okay.
Continue.
No, but I mean, because I couldn't remember the story completely. That's why I was looking at you trying to get.
So I told the story. Now, John, what?
But I mean, that's very much exactly what you're saying with that. If God sits here and goes, "No, I have ordained this for you,"
Yes.
you're not. You might dig your heels in at first, but you will
Right.
go.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a very important thing, that you may not agree with everything. Not everything may be according to biblical ways. But if God calls you to go to it, you need to do it.
Right.
Because it may not necessarily be this specific thing, but it might be for something somewhat unrelated.
Right, and you may never know what it is. But I'm going to go back to your reference really quick. We
His
also
reference.
have to, both of y'all's reference really quick, we have to also recognize the difference between Old Covenant and New Covenant in these types of situations.
Which we are going to do a podcast on later.
Exactly. I mean, you read from 1 Corinthians.
Mhm.
It's New Covenant, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the New Testament.
Yes. So that's a part of the New Covenant. So, whereas like there are parts of the Old Covenant we no longer have to actually abide by anymore. We don't have to make sacrifices for our sins every single time we sin.
Because Jesus fulfilled it.
Exactly, which is into the New Covenant. So I'm just saying, like, I always continue this back and forth in my brain and remind myself, okay, what part of this is Old Covenant, what part of this is New Covenant, and utilizing your story as that. Like, still, what is unclean? Why is it, like, if I've made it pure, who are you to say it's unclean? Who are you to say the Gentiles are unclean if I have made them pure because of the New Covenant? I just wanted to throw that little historic tidbit in there. I do know my history.
Well, this is where I'm
Occasionally.
going to put my 2
Oh, be
cents in.
kind.
And
Yes.
my personal view. I think it goes into how we react. I think for me, because I try very hard not to be judgmental, because I don't know
Absolutely.
somebody's heart.
Yeah.
We do know God specifically in the New Testament, in the
Mhm.
New Covenant, used women because they were not taken as seriously. And that's a
Right.
big
Yes.
reason why I know that I truly believe that the story of Jesus dying on the cross and everything is real, because why would you choose a woman to be the first one to figure that out? Which was, the woman who found the tomb empty.
3 women.
3 women.
Right.
Why would you choose women to be your first, braggers?
And his most ardent followers.
Yeah.
Because we can't keep our mouths shut.
Exactly.
Olivia's a prime example.
But at the time, women
It's
were not
wonderful.
taken seriously.
Is that a compliment?
I've given you a compliment already today.
Shocker.
Talking about how you do a great job with the social media.
Aww.
Aww. Look, you did too.
That was in last week's podcast.
I know, but look, it's been a week. I forget. I don't remember what I had for breakfast today. I think it was
I take
eggs and
offense to
biscuits.
that. I made
biscuit
it.
and egg sandwich. I think.
Yeah,
that's
yeah, with some cheese
Yeah.
on it.
I thought that was last week. I'm making jokes. Okay. I'll stop.
But so I think it's how we take it. I think if there is a woman preacher like the one I referred to with on the marriage DVD, I can't sit there and say I'm going to go against you being a preacher because I don't know what God has done in that woman's
Right.
heart. So for me, it's hard to take a stance and say no, women shouldn't be preaching, or yes, women should be preaching. I think it goes to the same thing as a guy preaching. I'm not going to sit here and be like, you know, this person who has a rough background should never be on the pulpit.
Right.
It honestly goes down to, do I see, kind of live what you were saying about the very blunt, and I'm going to tell it like it is, do I see that person, whether it's a male or a female,
Mhm.
preaching in a way that is biblically based? If so, then I don't have a right to sit there and be like, well, you're a woman, therefore you shouldn't be preaching.
Right.
So I think it's not so much, the issue isn't so much about women preaching, it's the reception of it, and
Right.
and keeping
Yeah,
them
I hear you.
accountable of, are you doing this because you're a feminist and you just want to prove that women can preach, or are you doing this because you were called to do it?
So
That was
the
kind of my
intention
point.
behind.
Yeah, the intention behind it.
Yeah.
So
I can stand by that, and I can agree with you on that.
yeah,
100%. If the intention is pure, then if my intention is to just make money and become a lawyer, I'd be a pretty awful lawyer if all I wanted was the money.
and there are some lawyers out there that's all they do.
Exactly.
Most lawyers.
I wouldn't say
not
that.
my personal lawyer, not the one I've got.
I've dealt with some
Yours.
good lawyers, so I'm not going to sit there and say that about lawyers.
I had a car accident, and I had a really good lawyer
Yeah.
as far as, you know, just making sure that I was well taken care of, and
Yep.
you know, the insurance covered everything,
Yep.
and I was compensated for everything. So I can stand by that and say, you know, you've definitely, even here, like right now on the podcast, which is, you know, really cool, opened my eyes to maybe even being a little bit more willing to sit back and say, all right, what is God utilizing this particular person for?
Yeah.
Moving forward, I can definitely agree with you on that.
Yeah.
100%.
So, Liv, we're going to take a break real quick. Do we have any shout-outs?
We do have a shout out this week. This week's shout out goes to Samantha _Grace _ photography. Again, like I said last week, we did a little like, hey, if you shout out this particular post, we'll give you a shout out on our February podcast. So thank you so much for supporting and giving us some, you know, awesome shout outs on your Instagram, Samantha _Grace _ photography. I also just want to say, because I'm going to give her an extra shout out, she is a fantastic photographer. So if you do need any photography, go check her out. She did our Christmas photos.
Oh, I loved y'all's Christmas photos.
Yep, she's a very good photographer. She has some really great work, so you guys should go check her out.
Awesome. And then also, while we are paused, do we have any group text questions?
Not yet. Not on this topic quite yet. But this
Okay.
was a topic given to us by a listener who wanted to hear our opinions on it. So
Yeah.
just
So this is one large group text.
this is one large group text.
Yes,
Listen.
Sean.
Now I'm wanting to go back to something you touched on earlier.
Okay.
You talked about earlier about the man being the spiritual head of the house.
Mhm.
Would, in your opinion, a woman preacher interrupt that flow?
Yeah, see that's where my opinions of women preaching
Come from?
come from, is the man is supposed to be the spiritual head of the household. Now, I've seen households where, you know, that role is not being met by the man,
Mm-hmm.
and I've seen households where the role, the man is not fulfilling that role, and that's when I would say someone needs to step in and somebody's going to have to do it. So I would see how that would work. But let's say that that woman is a preacher. Is her husband still the head of the household? I don't know, and that's kind of where it disrupts my that's where I kind of sink my heels in a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I
kind
will.
of the root of
Little
why I feel that
confessional
way.
here. I don't feel like I'm always great at being a spiritual head of the household with Jordan.
But you're being lifted up by your wife, who loves and supports you and continues to challenge you in how to fulfill that role.
And you're also being humble in that you're recognizing that, which a lot of people don't.
Exactly.
So that's just as important.
I like that you said a lot of people don't and not a lot of men don't. I appreciate that because I feel like women can dig in their heels just as much as guys can.
Oh, we're both
Their heels tend to be a
all
little bit
stubborn.
bigger, you know, with the...
Yeah, 6 inch heels.
Yeah, high heels were invented by men, so.
Yeah, I know.
Alright, so last question we're going to pose here. Is there a difference between a woman preaching and a woman being a preacher?
I believe so.
I mean, that's like asking, posing the question of, is a jacuzzi a hot tub? Or are all hot tubs jacuzzis?
Mhm.
No, but all jacuzzis are hot tubs.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of where my brain goes as far as that.
All pastors are preaching, not all people preaching are pastors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I agree
All
with that.
squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares.
So
Oh, a math person.
Hey.
I put John mentioned last night when we were talking, he said anybody who goes out and preaches and says the good news is a preacher. Or not is a preacher, but is preaching.
Yes.
And he was like, technically, we're preaching. Well,
Yes.
3 of us are women. So, again, it
I
is.
know.
So,
Odd man out.
poor John.
As
You
I'm
gotta
doing my
play-
little air
No,
violin.
you gotta play the world's
No,
the
no.
smallest violin.
SpongeBob. You're welcome.
Yes, I know. Thank you.
As somebody who didn't watch SpongeBob.
Oh,
I watched SpongeBob. I didn't
No,
watch the
I'm
new.
talking me.
Oh well, you know what?
it is
Again,
the world's
odd man
smallest
out.
violin.
It is.
So, yeah, I think that I would say, again, going back to what I was saying earlier, I think the intention,
Mhm.
I would have no problems with, even at our church, once a month of having a woman, or once every other month or whatever, having a woman getting up and speaking a sermon. I'd have no problems with that.
Right.
I think for me, going back to a question I posed to you, Liv, earlier, I think for me where the problem is I feel like women are really good multitaskers, but I feel like women also invest a lot of themselves into each individual thing. And for
Yes.
me, my problem with a woman being the head of a congregation, and I'm making that a distinction,
Mm-hmm.
is I do believe that they would put 100% of themselves into every single category that they're doing all at once, and that's going to burn somebody out. How do I know? Because I go through that on a day-to-day basis.
Yes.
Because I deal with 5 billion different things.
And
So-
they're all children.
And they're all children. But we're like
That's not true.
with John can sit there and when he's at work, that's what he's focused on. He's putting 100% of himself into that. When he gets home, he puts 100% of himself into home, but now work is out of his head.
So you're thinking about waffles versus spaghetti thing.
Yes. Whereas for me, when I'm at work, I have podcast on my mind. I
Mhm.
have what I need to get done at home on my mind,
Mhm.
and all of it is at 100% of meaning to put that effort into it. And so that's where I would have an issue with a woman being the head of a congregation,
Right.
is the fact that I know that they would put 100% of themselves into what they're doing, and that's going to burn them out.
Right. Which goes back to the needing to nurture every situation.
Yes. But go ahead, John.
I want to jump back to my personal view from last week's podcast of not really believing of a head pastor, but a person that's speaking for the heads of the church. Would that change how you would view it?
Well, you didn't really like that model to begin with, Liv, so...
I liked the model of a group of people with one speaker.
Mhm.
Oh,
That's why I'm quoting that one specifically.
Oh, okay, never mind. I was thinking of something else.
I think it would be interesting if there were multiple heads of a church, some being women, giving their opinions on what could work and what could potentially go over well within the congregation as a pastor then speaks. I think that would hold him accountable to not make it one-sided or too logistical or
Mhm.
too cut and dry, because there are some people who hear you don't believe in Christ, you're going to hell, as judgment and then walking away. So having that slight nurturing influence could potentially be a very interesting way of going about it. I'm not going to give you a straightforward answer. I'm going to leave it at that because that is interesting and it's not something I thought of.
Well, that's why I try to be here for, think of things.
This
that you
has
don't
been
think
challenging, Liv, today.
This is really cool. Well, I have a very straightforward opinion. I do believe that like women should be given rights and roles, and coming from someone who has a tendency to challenge leadership in the, like we talked about last week, in the role of accountability and pushing as far as accountability goes, I personally would not want to go and stand up and be a pastor, but I really like the idea of utilizing my dance as preaching.
Mm-hmm.
Utilizing my tattoo testimonies as preaching. Utilizing this podcast as preaching. I don't like being on this receiving end of all the questions.
Hey, it's gotta come around
feel,
you every once in a while.
But I mean, I feel like I've given a good, viewpoint of things.
You've taken it very well.
This kind of stuff doesn't give me any anxiety, so ask away. It's just weird because I feel like
the interrogator has become the interrogated.
Yeah, and I feel like it's that would be an interesting
dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah. But then it also leads me back to, talking about purpose of the church and having, a spiritual mind, or like head knowledge versus heart knowledge. Like, if a woman felt like she had the heart knowledge to stand up there and preach, I'm for it. But who am I to say, like, God didn't call you to be a pastor? Like, that's not my role. I'm not going to ever, sit there and say, look in front of the leaders and, hold them accountable and be like, God did not tell you to be a pastor. You're a woman. Like, that's not me.
That's what I was saying. I can't sit there and say that.
Because who am I to say, like, if someone came up to me and was like, I think God was wrong telling you to come bring that to my attention.
No.
You don't hear what God's telling me to do.
Yeah.
You're not God. You are not the Lord. Your voice is not the voice I hear when God talks to me. Who are you to say that, God said?
Well, it's the equivalent of somebody coming up to you and being like, God didn't call you to be a dancer. Like, it's the exact same thing.
Exactly. And so I would never go to a church and riot because it's a female pastor. That's just not who I am. That's the same with other things. Like, I would never go to somebody and be like, God did not tell you to say that.
Yeah.
That's not my right. But, going back to last week, we do have the right to hold certain people to a certain standard and accountability of it. So, there's that fine balance of where is it judgment, where is it accountability?
I think it's going and figuring out, again, what we said earlier, figuring out that intent. I think if something gets said that challenges you too much, and I'm going to reference last week about the whole, like, black magic thing with the wise man, Caroline. I think it's your right to sit there and go to that particular pastor or whoever said it, and I know it was a pastor, but I'm saying if it was me who said it or, whatever, I think you have that right to go and say, okay, I need a little background here because I didn't quite understand what you were saying. Can you explain it to me in a more one-on-one setting so that there is a for sure you can kind of get their mind, their train of thought completely and not in front of like 100 people. And if it's still not there, that's when you hold accountable where you're like, okay, now let me show you what I know that contradicts what you're saying. But you do it with a very loving thing. But I think the first thing that you always should do is get the other person's intent. Yes. Why did you say that? What made you say that? And it's okay to question. We are taught in our society, and I hate saying this, but especially women and children, we are taught to basically keep our mouths shut. Don't question anything.
I don't do that.
Liv definitely doesn't do that.
I have a big mouth.
Well, and I hate saying this, but I see it in the school systems. We are teaching these kids to just take authority and to not question what they're being told.
Do you know why?
Yes,
It's because
we don't
the
wanna deal with
initial
it.
public school system was created so that way the children of producers, like farmers, would get their education, and then they would go out into the industrial world where they would learn to take orders from their superiors to make products and to go farming and stuff. So, yeah, and that's why we have summer holiday, because that's when they go and, shuck the corn and do whatever they needed to do.
But I think it even goes, John and I were talking last night, not only would I love to be able to see women on the pulpit more, delivering messages that they feel called to, I would love to see teens on the pulpit more, because I have heard really, really deep sermons given by teens when they do, like, where the teens take over church for the day.
Mm-hmm.
There are teenagers that I have heard give sermons that are just amazingly deep, but they only get to do it once a year when it's the teen church day, and attendance is typically lower on that day.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like, that's not, again, going back to what we talked about last week, there are teens that have a clearer and more deeper thought process with some of this stuff. And I think it's how you're talking about it. If you're talking about marriage and you're doing a series on marriage, you need to have a woman give her perspective, because having it solely come from a guy, that's all you're going to get is the guy's perspective.
Marriage is a partnership.
Well, that's like saying, and this might be a little far-fetched, but that's like telling the Naomi and Ruth story just by Ruth's perspective.
Yes.
Like, there's still Naomi there.
Yeah.
Like,
I agree. Yeah.
She still has a part of that story. There's
and
still
Boaz. There are 3 principal characters.
Yeah. And leaving one of them out would remove a third of the story.
Mm-hmm. I think you need to have a rotation of different perspectives on a constant basis. But for people like you, Liv, who need that more, that kind of steady, consistent.
I'm a very consistent type person. If you could just ask my director at the dance company that I dance with, when she tells me, oh, just, change it up every time, I freak out. Funny story. Can I have story time with Olivia?
Yes!
This will be story time with Olivia.
We were doing a show in October, and it was this piece called Baggage, and I love this piece. And the final section, it was a Naomi and Ruth section where, it was the where you go, I go, where you stay, I stay, who you serve, I serve, your people are my people. It was awesome, and it was this duet. I got to do it with my director. But we attached it to this piece called Baggage, and at the end of the piece, everyone's piling backpacks around her because she's being overbeared by all of this baggage in her life, and I'm trying to support her through this whole thing. I pick her up. I'm trying to be like, let me carry 50% of this weight. Let me help support you. I'm willing. Let me help you. And I sit down. And we had just decided the new ending like a couple days ago. She's like, this is what we're going to do. I'm not going to change my mind. It's great. I sit down. I'm like, all right, I'm going to stand up, because originally I was going to stand up, remove one bag, help her up, and walk her off stage. And she was like, we sat down during the show. Shout out, you know who you are if you're listening to this. And I tell you all the time, don't ever do this again. But you know
your sins. You share your sins, no. Find you out.
Well, and it was a teaching tool for me, which was really cool. She leans over, music's still going on, leans her head on my shoulder, which she's supposed to do, that's choreographed. She goes, take my bag from me. I was like, you did not. Just change it. Because I'm a very consistent dancer. You tell me to be on this spot at this time during this count, I will never change until you tell me otherwise. And I try my best. It makes me a very reliable dancer. Yeah. And that is a strength for companies. Then you have the dancers who don't necessarily do that, but that is a strength within a company too. And I was like, oh, you didn't just do that. And now we're doing this piece called Storm, and she's very much like, I don't really care. However you want to move from one side of the chair to the other, I don't care how you do it. But if she hadn't done that in Baggage, I would not have grown as a dancer to be more willing to be like, okay, you don't care how I sit in the chair and how I switch in my chair of depression. It's my chair of depression, apparently.
So she's giving you more interpretive license, it sounds like?
Yes, and I'm not that type of person.
Oh.
I'm more so like I am with my choreography, but I'm more so as if I am your dancer in a company, you tell me to go to that spot, I will never change.
Because you don't want to impose your own interpretation on someone else's vision.
Exactly. And when we did the Naomi Ruth duet, she knew that I would be on the same spot for me to catch her every single time, which helps with partnering because every single time she jump, I would have her the same time. Anyway, story time over. I don't really know how I got to that point.
I don't know either, but it was a very nice story.
You're talking about the consistency within a church and how Jordan's talking about.
I really, really enjoy consistency. I'm a habitual person. You should all know this by now.
Oh, yeah.
I, to the T, am very habitual.
Yep. All right. I think that's it, y'all. Shout out again to our user.
Samantha _Grace_.
No, the one who suggested it.
Oh. Ian David Mount.
But...
Yeah. Ian, thank you so much for suggesting this. And if you want to suggest, more podcast ideas in the future, we do take them into consideration. We do think about them because, if you're going to ask us to do something that's a little bit, is murder okay?
No.
We've already talked about this in a previous podcast.
In multiple podcasts.
Yeah.
I try to bring it up every time.
I'm about to say, I'm surprised it didn't sneak into the accountability within the church. Because that was the prime time.
A little too predictable.
I mean, okay,
I'm trying to be unpredictable here.
But Liv, does it hurt your feelings?
But then you're not
that
consistent.
Somebody murdered somebody.
It hurts my feelings.
Look.
That you decided to end somebody's life.
Okay, now I'm going to come with you.
But I'm going to forgive you.
Well, here we
I'll forgive you, but...
It's always
Deja vu, anyone?
Remember when you tried to kill me twice?
Okay, kill me once, shame on you. Try to kill me twice, shame on me for being stupid.
Portal reference.
I never
My grandfather used to say that all the time. It was football.
It's okay.
Do it to me once, shame on you. Do it to me twice, shame on me.
I'm the idiot.
Mm-hmm.
I'll let you do it twice. Shame. Do it to me 3 times. I probably deserve to be murdered.
Olivia, I'm going to try to murder you 3 times. And fail on purpose all 3 times.
Yeah.
The only time that
then you're just bad at your
job.
job.
There's something wrong.
Well,
talk about it?
Who was it? I'm not a theologian and I'm really bad with names. But which one was it that heard the crow 3 times? Peter, you'll deny me 3 times. Look at him now.
Mm-hmm.
Look at him now. He did it 3 times. Look at him now. I mean, he did end up in jail, but was not.
Well,
at one point.
Yeah, but that was after he and Jesus got cool again, and the angel
they had a legit, truly come to Jesus moment with Peter.
Hello,
come to me moment.
Come to me over a nice
twice.
Dinner.
They had to do it twice.
Yep. Come to me.
No.
Talk.
He did it 3. He asked the question 3 times to simulate the 3.
I know, but Peter had to be held accountable.
I was talking about the initial "Come follow me," and then after he denounced them coming back, he had to go through a come to Jesus meeting twice.
Peter, what's wrong with you?
I can't even imagine that Peter sitting there being like, "I had to have a come to Jesus meeting." Oh, well, that's you actually had to come to him.
Come to Jesus is a meme now, okay? So it's a little different.
People ask, so how was your walk with the Lord? I had 2 come to Jesus meetings. What do you think?
I mean, considering he was standing right beside me, they were pretty dang intense. I mean, he even told me how I was going to die,
I did not like that.
I mean, he did.
I know.
Y'all knew that, right?
I love that. Peter had legit come to Jesus meetings twice.
The Rock.
And neither one are shame on Jesus. They were both shame
on
him.
Peter. Yep.
I can't wait to see the montage in heaven of, Jesus with these hooligans, these teenagers and young adults, and how many times his eyes just got really wide and he had to go, okay.
So I'm doing this for a reason.
Christ sitting as a teenager, talking to God. All right. Who are my 12? And God's like, this one, all 12. Are you sure? Are you really sure right now?
I mean, this one.
Why?
I'm not sure about this one right here. This one especially.
This one's gonna be the reason I die.
And
are you sure about this one?
Speaking about that, I don't even really want to go through that. Is there any other way
Can
of
we
doing
not?
this?
No, okay.
Age
Nah,
13.
he wasn't
I
like
got
that.
20
Well, he
years.
did
Do I have
ask
to
you, is
deal
there
with
any other way
this
of
one?
doing it?
Yes, but there's a difference between a desperate human cry and I had to get that out of my system. I am now resigned. You know.
No, I mean, I think, yeah, that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, that is a whole other topic.
We're getting,
But just remember, we did establish God has a sense of humor.
If he calls James and John's the son of thunder, you know, I mean, they have their own nickname. God gave people nicknames. Is that not the cutest thing ever?
That's
Well,
pretty
John was
dope.
John with the beloved.
Yeah.
All right, John, lead us out.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Call to the Table. If you would like to get in contact with us for suggesting any ideas, submitting a prayer request, or just wanting to chat with us, please join us at
Talk
Call
to
to
me.
the Table Pod at Instagram and Facebook. Or you can email us at calltothetable@gmail.com.
You got this.
You can do it.
I love how they were the ones that finished that off. for
Yup.
me.
You're a big boy. You can finish the sentence.
I want to start staring all three of y'all down.
Antissa.
And please join us next time when we talk about missions
And mission trips.
and mission trips.
Bye.
Bye.
I really don't like the fact that you speak tenderly and look at me. I should do this outro. Goodbye.
Words of wisdom, let it
Carolyn.
be. Let it